Stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am reviewing the Mystic cards from A Phantom of Truth, the third Mythos pack in the Path to Carcosa cycle. As you're aware, I have split up the reviews of this Mythos pack into 5 parts to make it a little bit easier for you out there to digest, so make sure you check out the reviews of the other cards for the other classes when you've got the time. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. So with that in mind, let's see what A Phantom of Truth has in store for Arkham Horror's Mystic Investigators. The first Mystic card in the pack is Recharge. It's a free event that costs 2 experience points. It has 2 willpower skill icons and the spell trait. It has the game text, choose a spell or relic asset controlled by an investigator at your location and reveal a random chaos token from the chaos bag. If you reveal a skull, cultist, tablet, elder thing, or tentacle symbol, discard the chosen asset. Otherwise, add 3 charges to the chosen asset. This is the second Mystic card in as many Mythos packs that enables players to add charges to spells. The Unspeakable Oath Mythos pack featured the level 1 version of Book of Shadows, which allows you to add 1 charge to a spell for the low cost of 1 experience point, 4 resources, and 2 actions. Inefficient in the extreme, Book of Shadows hasn't found a home in many of my decks, or any of my decks, and it's highly unlikely to in the future. That card just, frankly, it stinks. The designers take another stab at the whole adds charges to spell shtick with Recharge. Recharge is a spell, so you can search for it with the Arcane Initiate, and Agnes Baker can draw a card after she casts it if she has her Heirloom of Hyperborea in play. Recharge also has 2 willpower skill icons. One of only 3 Mystic cards that have that distinction, the others being Uncage the Soul and the level 2 version of Fearless from the Where Doom Awaits Mythos pack. Recharge has the potential to add 3 charges to quite a few different cards in the game. You've got your Alchemical Transmutation, both versions of Archaic Glyphs that we reviewed in the Seeker portion of this Mythos pack, Clarity of Mind, Rite of Seeking, both levels of those, Scrying, all 3 versions of Shriveling, and Song of the Dead, as well as Suggestion, which is a rogue spell. A rogue spell. Boy, that's haven't said that yet. Coming out in the Black Stars Rise Mythos pack. You can also use Recharge on relics, so you can play it to add 3 charges to your Grotesque statue as long as it has at least 1 charge remaining. You cannot use your Grotesque statue to try to work around the random chaos tokens from drawing a random chaos token from the bag if you only have 1 charge. As soon as you remove that charge from the grotesque statue will go away, and your recharge will simply fizzle. Now, recharge will cost you 2 experience points and an action, so it's already miles ahead of the Book of Shadows in terms of efficiency. However, there is a catch, of course. You need to reveal that random token from the chaos bag, and if the token is a skull, cultist, tablet, elder thing, or tentacle, you discard the spell or relic instead. Now, if you're playing the Night of the Zealot campaign on standard difficulty, you've got anywhere from 31.25 to 35.39% chance of your recharge misfiring. In the Dunwich Legacy, that's anywhere from 26 to 42, depending on how many tokens you've added to the bag. And in the Path to Carcosa, you've got the highest level, about 35.29 to anywhere from 38.89% chance of misfiring. Now, those odds of failure seem pretty high to me for a card that costs 2 experience points. Now, if a spell has no charges on it, I wouldn't be too concerned about pulling one of the special tokens and discarding it. You know, it might even be a good thing to discard the spell, since if you can find a way to reshuffle it back into your deck, perhaps using the card we're going to look at next, which will do just that. However, at that point you've taken 2 actions and you haven't really advanced your win condition in any substantial way. You might have the time to do that sort of thing in multiplayer, but I think you're quickly going to find yourself desperately short of time if you're playing a scenario like the Unspeakable Oath, for example, where you don't have any extra actions to spare in that scenario. You need to get moving and get moving fast because you're going to run out of time. So if you're spinning your wheels playing things like recharge and trying to reshuffle your discard pile back into your deck and whatnot, you could run into time trouble. Now, if your spell or relic asset still has charges on it when you play recharge, I think you're taking a pretty big risk of losing not only the action, but the asset as well. Normally, I'd say a card that fires 65 to 75% of the time is good, but honestly, I'm really not a fan of the idea of recharge, that recharge is going to misfire almost a third of the time. There are consequences if you pull a special token when using Shriveling or Rite of Seeking, for example, but at least those cards don't fail altogether. If you pull a special token when you play, if you use a Shriveling charge, you take a horror. Okay, your Shriveling doesn't not work. You don't hit the enemy. It still happens. You still do the damage. The horror, okay, I'll take the horror, but I want the damage. But when you play recharge, you get nothing. You simply get to discard the asset. And that to me just doesn't, I want something, if I'm paying 2 experience points, I want it to happen. I don't want a chance of it happening, even if that chance is fairly good. And I think if they had designed recharge a little bit closer to the lines of Shriveling of Rite of Seeking, where maybe if you pulled one of the special tokens, you only got 1 charge or something like that, I think that would be a little bit more, I'd be a lot more on board with this card if it did that, rather than just fizzle entirely. Now, the designers have taken a few cracks at creating cards that add spells, add charges to spells, and the results have really been mixed. You've got to wonder whether the ability to add charges to spells turned out to be just crazy, god-awful, overpowered in playtesting, because the designers have really gone out of their way to make it as time-consuming, expensive, unreliable, or a combination of all three in the cards they've put out so far. Now, don't get me wrong, Recharge is a much, much better option than Book of Shadows, because it's much more efficient, and it does come with those 2 juicy willpower skill icons. However, it's also unreliable, which I don't really expect for a card that's going to cost me 2 experience points, and I just don't see it making a cut in my decks for that reason. If I'm paying 2 experience points for a card, I expect it to do some serious work, and there's just no guarantee Recharge will have your back when you need it. Now, I'm not even sure whether investigators who play spells or relics want or need this type of effect, when you can often simply play a second copy of that spell or relic and get a much better result. I've been playing a lot of Mystic lately, and so I've been trying to, when I saw this card, I was trying to pay attention to the times I was running out of my Shriveling charges to see whether in fact I could use a card like Recharge. And I was running out of my Shriveling charges, and I thought, oh, well, Recharge will help me. But then I realized I was running out of Shriveling charges, but that was actually costing me the game, because I was much better off not using my Shriveling at all. I was much better evading the enemies. And so Recharge, I thought it might help, but then when I realized what I was doing wrong, it turns out I just didn't need the Recharge. I really just shouldn't have been using the Shriveling charges as often as I was. So that's definitely something to consider. I really want to be on board with Recharge, because I do like those 2 willpower icons, but as it stands, it just, I don't know, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. The second Mystic card in the pack is Quantum Flux. It's a 1-cost event with a wild skill icon, the insight trait, and the game text. Shuffle your discard pile back into your deck and draw 1 card. Remove Quantum Flux from the game. It seems like all the classes are receiving an answer to Beyond the Veil this cycle. Survivors got theirs in the form of Devil's Luck in the last Mythos pack, and the Mystics get theirs in this pack in the form of Quantum Flux. If you're a Mystic who's playing through the Dunwich Legacy campaign, you couldn't really go wrong with a copy or two of Quantum Flux. It's a very effective way of protecting yourself from that nasty treachery. The big question is whether Quantum Flux is any good besides countering Beyond the Veil. And, like I mentioned, I have been playing quite a bit of Mystic lately, and I have considered adding this card to my deck a few times. It hasn't made the cut quite yet, but I could certainly see playing it at some point in a Mystic deck. I really like the versatility that comes with that wild icon, which are relatively rare in the Mystic card pool. There are only 2 other Mystic cards with wild icons, those being Ward of Protection from the core set and Defiance, a skill that came out in the Blood and the Altar Mythos pack. If you're concerned about the icon spread in your deck and you've got the deck slots to spare, you could do a lot worse than playing a copy of Quantum Flux just for the wild icon. Quantum Flux could also come in handy if you're playing a deck that draws through itself very quickly, since it will save you a horror when you have to reshuffle. Now, most of the draw in this game is in the Seeker class, which means you're probably looking at playing Quantum Flux in a Daisy or Rex deck, although I really doubt that Rex would be interested in spending his out-of-class deck slots on this. But you never know. Daisy might find it useful. Saving a horror is never a bad thing, and if you've got that wild icon and you just happen to need a reshuffle, you've got it handy. I think Quantum Flux could also make a case for itself in a deck that plays plenty of event or skill cards. If the encounter deck forces you to run through a few of your key cards sooner than you'd like, it's nice to have the option of reshuffling your discard pile back into your draw deck early. Quantum Flux also draws you a card, so it does replace itself, which is nice. The only problem with that, of course, is that it's also going to shuffle any weaknesses that you've drawn back into your discard pile or back into your deck, so you can encounter them again. You're really not going to be a happy camper if Quantum Flux replaces itself with one of those. Quantum Flux is going to be one of those cards that I think it's always going to be on the bubble. It has the potential to be quite useful, but there's only so many deck slots to go around, and deck slots are getting tighter and tighter with the release of each subsequent Mythos pack. If you're playing the Dunwich Legacy campaign, I'd definitely consider including at least a copy to counter Beyond the Veil. I haven't seen much in the Path to Carcosa campaign to really warrant playing Quantum Flux, but there are still 3 Mythos packs to go, so who knows what the designers have in store for us. Usually, I tend to think that the designers like to seed cards. I'm thinking of Fine Clothes, which came out during the Dunwich Legacy, but didn't really see much play there. But I think it's pretty important at the beginning of the Path to Carcosa. So maybe, who knows? Maybe the designers are seeding the card pool for something that's coming up down the road. I think Quantum Flux is probably going to end up on the cutting room floor more often than not. But that wild icon may sway a few players to give it a chance. So there you have it. Those are the Mystic cards from a Phantom of Truth. Neither of the cards in this pack get me all that excited. Despite the designer's best efforts, I'm just not sold on the whole adds charges to assets angle that they've been pushing in the last 2 Mythos packs. I like Recharge a lot better than I did Level 1 Book of Shadows, but I'm really struggling with the idea of paying 2 experience for a card that isn't guaranteed to work. Like I mentioned, I'd probably be sold if it gave me only 1 charge if I pulled a special token, but as it stands, I just can't recommend spending the experience on a card like Recharge. As for Quantum Flux, it feels like it's going to be that 31st card in a lot of Mystic decks. Besides providing protection from Beyond the Veil, Quantum Flux will save you a sanity if you need to reshuffle, and it boasts one of the few rare wild icons in the Mystic card pool. There are those games that in Arkham Horror when the encounter deck hits you so hard at the beginning that you end up burning through a lot of your key cards early and risk running out of steam towards the end of the scenario. And Quantum Flux is nice because it does give you a chance to reset your deck in those circumstances. Maybe get a second win, get your feet back under you, and plow ahead after a rough start. Let's just hope there's no weaknesses in that discard pile of yours when you do reshuffle it. That's going to do it for me today. If you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate it if you could leave me a thumbs up. It helps out the channel a great deal. Have you played with either of these cards? Let me know in the comments down below. I always enjoy chatting with you guys about the cards in this game. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to be notified of when I release future content, and make sure you check out the video for the giveaway of the Path to Carcosa Deluxe expansion that is going on right now. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.